done any videos for a couple of months. I've been very busy, but I want to come back now and reiterate some of the points I've made in my videos over the past year about ship burials and about Indo-European customs, and just elaborate on them and finish off everything to do with the boat burial cult. In my previous videos on the sacred cow and the wild boar, I looked at the roles of these animals in Indo-European mythology. Just to tell anyone who isn't aware what that means is Indo-Europeans are a language group spoken, Proto-Indo-European that is, over 6,000 years ago, and the presumed homeland of the speakers was somewhere around Russia, Ukraine, but the culture that was associated with them spread with the Indo-European languages around 6,000 years ago, or perhaps much earlier even, and with that culture a religion, and that's why we find so many similarities between Indo-European religions, which include the only surviving ones today, you could argue, are really Hinduism, or is Hinduism, and perhaps Zoroastrianism to a certain extent. But the European pagan religions were all related to this as well. And they had etymological relationships between the gods. You can see that linguistically they're connected, and that there are also conventions within the religions that are similar. One of the most striking ones is the chariot, which is widely regarded as being central to the original Indo-European religion. It survives in later religions like Hinduism as the Ashvins, and in Greek religion as the Dioscuri, I think it's pronounced. You have chariot gods, and in many Indo-European religions the sun is pulled on a chariot, and these are recorded versions of them quite later. I mean, we have in Hinduism even the sun is a male god, and he's sometimes depicted being pulled by a chariot, horses. The original Indo-European religion was, Proto-Indo-European religion, had a female sun goddess pulled along in a chariot, no doubt, as well. And the chariot is already associated with the Proto-Indo-Europeans, also sometimes called Aryans, because of linguistic evidence pointing to the fact that that early language, they had words for chariots and parts of chariots, bits of chariots and things. So the chariots were obviously part of their culture, material culture, but also were integrated into the religious culture. One piece of material culture which is widely regarded as evidence of this very early Proto-Indo-European religion is this chariot, which was found in Denmark in a bog, and it's covered in gold, and you can see clearly it's a horse pulling a sun disk. It corresponds exactly to what we know of the early Proto-Indo-European or Aryan religion and what they believed. Yet it was found all the way in Denmark. Now that's a long way from the Indo-European homelands down in Ukraine. And this is among Germanic people. The term Germanic people or Nordic people refers to a group of people which was recognized by the Romans as being related tribes, and we recognize their relationship due to the linguistic relationship between the Germanic language groups, and also that these Germanic tribes all worshipped a Germanic religion. But the Germanic languages didn't emerge until around, it is believed by linguists, 3,000 years ago. And somewhere probably in Denmark they began and then spread out from there. The Germanic languages are of course derived from this Proto-Indo-European language. So by the time the Germanic languages are starting to be spoken in Northern Europe, you know that there's been considerable interaction between the indigenous peoples of Northern Europe and this Indo-European culture. Whether that was brought specifically by an ethnic group of Indo-Europeans is debatable. But in any case, we can't debate the fact that the Indo-European culture spread into Northern Europe before the Germanic languages came to be spoken. The first Proto-Germanic language was spoken, or the first Proto-Celtic language was spoken, because the Proto-Celtic and Proto-Germanic languages both emerged in Europe around 3,000 or 4,000 years ago. About 3,000 years ago, I should say. The language doesn't just come out of nowhere. Suddenly everyone speaks this brand new language. It's derived from earlier Indo-European languages. So we can say that long before the people of Germany and Denmark, the tribes there, ever spoke Indo-European languages, they were in contact with Indo-European culture. And that sun chariot may be not have been made by people who necessarily spoke Indo-European languages, but who were beginning to engage with this new Indo-European culture and this new way of understanding the divine, which was so popular around the world with so many different races and spread so far and endured for so long that we can see today in Hinduism how its legacy in India. But these people, Germanic people, they worshipped gods before they ever worshipped Indo-European gods, and they had religions and they had customs. And the question is, what exactly were they like? Because we look at evidence from the Bronze Age, because it was the Bronze Age this cultural transition happened. And there seems to be some things that do not correspond with the wider Indo-European culture. And these, we can presume, were the pre-Indo-European Nordic, Germanic cultural elements and religious elements. There is a theory called the Germanic substrate hypothesis, and based on the languages, it says how the vocabulary and syntactical forms of Germanic have elements which do not correspond to other Indo-European languages. So these are presumed to therefore be from the early, pre-Indo-European Germanic peoples. But there's also a way of some perhaps controversial way of interpreting this hypothesis not only with linguistics but with DNA. And according to this theory, the indigenous pre-Indo-European hunter-gatherer ethnic groups, although they weren't hunter-gatherers by that stage, but they were the genetic relatives of the original hunter-gatherer populations of Europe. These are associated with the I1 haplogroup, which is the haplogroup I have, by the way. The paternal haplogroup for Y DNA, which is passed from father to father to father. Where this is today found in highest concentrations where I am right now in Sweden, and it gets lower and lower as you move away from this area of the world. But the most common Western European haplogroups, Y DNA haplogroups, are the R1A and R1B groups. And these, according to this theory, are to be associated with the new invading Indo-European peoples. So, that would be quite interesting because it would indicate that Scandinavia had a more significant survival of the pre-Indo-European genetic heritage of Europe, whereas the Indo-European peoples were more... at least their genetic legacy was more prevalent further south, which makes sense because they were coming up from the south. What we can presume, if this theory is correct, which I believe it is that the original Germanic tribes, represented by the I1 haplogroup, mixed with these invading peoples from southern Europe, originally from the Ukraine perhaps, mixed their religions, they mixed their cultures, and new languages emerged. The Germanic language emerged as a result, and the Germanic pagan religion emerged as a result, as we know it, or as we try to reconstruct it based on sources from the Romans right through to the medieval era. What we know about linguistically about these religions seems to correspond with this theory. But then, what elements are surviving in this Germanic religion which are not from the Aryan or Indo-European people? I believe the boat cult, which is what I've been looking at, all these boat things, because contemporary with this sun chariot, you have also a lot of this. There's also carvings, rock carvings in northern Europe, and these prehistoric rock carvings depict some chariots as well. And we can presume that the people carving these might not have even spoken a Germanic language yet, but they were in touch with Indo-European cultures, surely. And that is perhaps why there are already depictions of chariots, which are widely believed to have been brought into Europe by Aryan Indo-European peoples, the Proto-Indo-Europeans. So the prominence of that chariot is indication that they were already in touch with that culture. And even, from later, the medieval sources, Thor is a chariot riding god. He's got his goat-drawn chariot. and chariot. The other gods have chariots as well, but there's far more depictions in these ancient rock carvings of boats, and the boats don't play a role universally in Indo-European religion. There are, of course, instances of boats in many pagan religions having important roles. Egypt, particularly ancient Egypt, there was boat burials and things, but they're different. They're not really related to what we're seeing in Scandinavia, and it's a long time later, and there's no direct link we can see culturally or anything like that. There certainly aren't boat burials in any other parts of Europe in the same way as we see from Vendel period and Viking period. But then again, there aren't boat burials from the prehistoric Nordic period either. So I think the boat burials are themselves a development of a much older boat cult, which had different manifestations throughout the centuries in Scandinavia. The original and earliest manifestations of these, I believe, are these carvings of the rock carvings of boats, on which you can see what appear to be ceremonial activities being conducted. Weapons and people raising certain things, and there's also theories relating to these rock carvings of boats about the boat being the conveyor of the sun, which would perhaps, if it's not some kind of synchronistic development of a very similar idea of the Indo-European idea of the sun conveying the chariot through the sky, it might otherwise be a reinterpretation of the Indo-European one, because they weren't originally so interested in chariots, having being predominantly a waterborne people travelling along the river systems and lakes which are scattered across the Scandinavian peninsula. You'll see, I mean, actually also contemporary, you have these little golden boat models. I mean, what their exact role in the religion of the people who made them is, we cannot tell. But undeniably, boats were important to them in a way that we don't see elsewhere in Indo-European cultures. But there certainly were seagoing peoples, Indo-European peoples in southern Europe. The Luwians are currently believed perhaps to be those referred to by the ancient Egyptians as the sea peoples, and the Luwians were definitely Indo-European language speakers. The next manifestation of the Nordic boat cult is when you start to come towards what we recognise as the definitely Germanic people. Like they're speaking Germanic languages. Not only are there the boat burials of the Vendel era, but there's both cremations of boats. And the varying burial practices you see throughout the ages, from the Iron Age up into, early Iron Age right through to Viking Age and medieval times, are quite diverse. Sometimes they sink the boat in the sea. Sometimes they set fire to the boat and then cover it in a burial mound. Sometimes they bury the whole boat without burning it and put a burial mound over it. And burial mounds are not unique to Northern Europe. You can read in the Greek sources, the Homeric sources, they erected burial mounds on prominent places on the edge of the sea to great heroes, just like the Norse were doing. And there was perhaps a close link between Bronze Age Scandinavia and Greece. A lot of people seem to think that was the case, and there's literary evidence to support that. But these burial mounds were also, we find really ancient burial mounds, thousands of years old, in Scandinavia, in Britain, in Greece, all around Europe. So they might predate the Indo-European culture, but they were also somehow integrated with it as well. Another Indo-European aspect of religion that's very important is the horse. The horse is common as a very important animal in Indo-European religion, just as the chariot was. I mean, the horse draws the chariot. The domestication of the horse happened on the plains of perhaps Mongolia, and it was spread around by different horse people, and the Indo-Europeans, the Aryans, brought the horse and chariot culture around to lots of parts of the world. We see in ancient Hindu culture the prominence of horse-drawn chariots, even though if you've been to India, you'll know horses aren't really an important animal the way they are there, the way they are in Europe. So that's evidence of the importing of a culture from somewhere else where horses would be more convenient, because horses aren't ideal in jungles. Actually, they're good for flat plains. like you find in the steppes, where the Proto-Indo-European people originated. Nordic people, the Nordic religion, the Germanic religion, I did my dissertation on this for my master's. Horse burial, horse sacrifice is extremely important. It's prominent in it. I won't go into it too much here, but just read my dissertation. It's called Riding to the Afterlife, and you'll learn more about that. Another aspect of that is not from the pre-Indo-European area, because you don't see these things when you go right further back into history. Probably because Nordic people weren't getting around on horses then, they were getting around on boats. Some deities, actually, I say in this dissertation, are really associated with horses, a lot. And I thought that perhaps Freyr was, really linked to this horse cult. But Freyr is also very much connected to this ancient boat cult. And he had the boat, Skíðblaðnir. His father, the god of the sea, Njörðr. God of the sea, this is a connection between boats and the sea and the land. Freyr is a god of fertility and therefore associated with the land, but his father is a sea god. So that is somehow tied up with it. But this, if you know about Germanic mythology, you'll know that there's two sort of sets of gods, the Vanir and the Æsir. And there's separate categories of gods, and there's some story of a war, a battle between them, and an emerging of cultures, an emerging of ideas. And a lot of people, perhaps controversially now, it's not so widely accepted, have put forward the theory that this meeting of the Vanir and Æsir is based on some historic event where cultures met. And if that's the case, then it would undoubtedly be the meeting of the Indo-European culture from the south and the indigenous Nordic religion that had preceded it. In which case, perhaps the Vanir, because the Æsir are seen as the Indo-European incoming gods, the Vanir would represent then, to some extent, the survival of the original Germanic religion. And that might explain perhaps why Freyr, who is of the Vanir, would be associated with boats. And so that's kind of speculative, but we see the rune stones sometimes depicting boats. We know that the Anglo-Saxon kings like Radwald, the Sutton Hoo burial, this is the boat burial, it's just like those that were happening at the Vendel period in Sweden at the same time. This style of boat burial with warriors, prominent men with their weapons, with their helmets, and often with horse sacrifices as well. Usually horses sacrificed and laid outside the boat, not inside. And other animals too, sometimes dogs. This was a religious activity, and the boat had some kind of role. And I believe that in the Vendel period, that this is the manifestation of this much older prehistoric custom of this, which recognised the sacral quality of a boat, perhaps as a vehicle to the next world, or a symbolic vehicle which should not be taken literally, but because otherwise every single individual would have to be buried with a boat in order to transition to the next world, because they are at no point homogeneous in burial practices in Nordic people. They're always different kinds, sometimes cremation, sometimes burial. So it should be seen as a symbolic means of transportation of the soul, and perhaps reflecting the passage of the sun, which has been transported by boats or by chariot in different parts of history. The sun in Nordic religion is female, as it was in the original Aryan religion, not male as it is in Hindu and Greek religion. Then this carried on right into the Viking Age. The most striking example, I think, is the Useberg burial in Norway, where actually that's a bit different because it was a woman, not a man, and she was perhaps a queen, a very important woman, and that boat itself doesn't appear to have been functional like the ones here in Vendel. Those were used for transportation on the river systems, on the river Thuris, which runs here through Uppsala and past Valsgärde and where all these burial mounds are. But the Useberg one seems purely ceremonial. It's a beautiful ship and it's well preserved. It's in Oslo. You can see it if you go there. Summing up then, the boat has diverse roles. It can't be seen as one continuous boat cult. The fact that it is continuously used in the pagan religions practiced in Scandinavia, despite the fact that they underwent radical changes over the centuries, demonstrates the importance of the boat to these people. And rather than viewing that purely along the lines of practical, the practical function of the boat in a culture which relies on the sea and the river systems for transportation, because there are other European cultures who are equally dependent on these, there must be seen some metaphysical significance to the symbol of the boat. And that is what I am trying to look at, and have been in these videos that I've been going over the past few months. I won't be addressing this issue again. I think I've done it to death now. But my next video will be on quite a different subject indeed. I will be looking at Sri Lanka, the country Sri Lanka, which I'm going to visit very soon. And if you enjoyed this video, please consider becoming a patron, donating money. You only will be charged every time I upload a video. And since I haven't uploaded anything for 2 months, you can see how infrequently you will be charged. Alternatively, you can just give me a one-off donation on PayPal. I will appreciate it very much. And thank you very much for watching.